monitores la calidad del material que se presenta y que sobre todo aborda temas muy cercanos a lo que trabajamos y nuestro mandato en el CGIAR, como son la innovación en la agricultura, la importancia de los bienes públicos, los retos medioambientales para los sistemas agroalimentarios, entre otros. Pues busqué inmediatamente a Ernesto para proponerle esta idea de intercambiar sobre estos temas entre ambas instituciones. Ernesto se entusiasmó inmediatamente con la idea.
Institutions. So I right away contacted him because we are a development institution and they are an institution dedicated to science and innovation. Both of us deal with agribusiness systems. I was glad to see that our BID and CGIAR colleagues accepted our invitation to participate in this meeting. We're going to have a very, very rich information. Thank you for attending. We're going to proceed as follows. After each of the interventions, after the presentation of the BID report, a colleague of the CGIAR will share his comments that have to do with that presentation or that topic. After that, we will have the time so that the panelists answer the questions that we will be getting in writing from people connected remotely or from people who are participating on site. So start answering, prepare your questions and forward them to us. Jesus Quintano will receive them, will curate them and organize them so that we can have a very rich Q&A session. To end, Bram, our host, will end with a recap of the major reflections and, in his opinion, what would be the major conclusions of this very interesting morning. To get started as a preamble of the presentation by BID, I would like to share with you some of the reflections that I would like all of us to bear in mind throughout the session, particularly because agribusiness systems have been considered a sector where there is little room for innovation. We have focused on efficiency and cost reduction, but this is a paradigm that is farther and farther away from reality. In recent years, the increase in the world supply for agricultural foods and their value for the quality and manufacturing of products has led to a structural change in the productivity of the sector. This has led to a definitive change. So we are producing faster, we have more diversity and quality of products, and science-based agriculture is becoming more and more an increasingly relevant mechanism at the global level. Latin America and the Caribbean are not exempted from this. Our companies have progressively experienced technological advances. In many cases, they have become the epicenters of technological modernization and generators of high quality jobs. But Latin America and the Caribbean are still facing certain challenges to increase their productivity and to achieve innovation based quality. I do consider that there is the need for innovation to be assimilated and incorporated by many more companies in the industry. But also the small farmers need to embrace innovation. This is part of our mandate at CGIAR to take care of this sector, particularly of the global South countries. We have established partnerships with the academia, with CGIAR, and with the global and regional development banks and national banks. This becomes key. So CGIAR is at the forefront of the development and implementation of productive transformation that is based on genetic information, data sciences, to protect biodiversity, which is so rich and important in the region, to increase productivity, to turn food systems more resistant to climate change and pests, and so that we can close the gap between modern and traditional agriculture. The public goods is another key topic for us this morning, particularly in agricultural innovation. This is crucial. The states should work together with the private sectors, international financial organizations, as is the case of in Latin America, regional banks. They should work together with the academia, with researchers at the global and country level. At CGIAR, we have the commitment of making sure the region becomes a supplier of high productivity agricultural products that it protects the environment and with an inclusive approach. Having said this, I would like to give the floor to our friend Ernesto Stein, who will share with us the report of the the BID competing in agro industry or agribusiness. Many, many thanks, Joaquin. Many thanks for this invitation. Thanks to you and to Bram. We feel very happy to be here with you, sharing our reflections with you. Can you please project my slides? As you may see, this is the result of teamwork. You see the names of participants or the coordinators of this effort on the slide. Every year, the research department of BID prepares a microeconomic report. The one that we prepared last year has to do with agribusiness or agro-industry. I'm wearing my hat today of Mexico BID representative, but before that, I spent a long time working at the research department. It was then, when I was there, that I coordinated this project. This is the result of a very close collaboration between the research department, the Environmental Rural Development and Disaster Management Division, and Invest, which is the private part of the BID. You are very used to thinking about agricultural topics. I didn't have any training in that sector or had worked in that sector. It was thought that the quickest road towards development had to go not necessarily through the agricultural sector, but rather through industrialization. It involved structural transformation processes, mobilizing workers from low productivity sectors. And low productivity sectors represented the traditional agriculture. It was thought that they should become high productivity sectors. And when we thought about high productivity, we thought about modern manufacturing. Why? We assumed that manufacturing had certain attributes like high productivity and high growth of productivity. Uh, Non-skilled labor intensity, which is a characteristic of our country, of our countries. This is an exportable sector that was not limited by the internal market. It was thought that it also had the capability of generating certain knowledge and capabilities that would later on would allow us to go from producing certain goods to producing increasingly complex and sophisticated goods. But manufacture-based development has clear limits. Roderick speaks about early deindustrialization processes. For developing countries, the opportunities of industrialization are being exhausted increasingly soon. Our alternative strategy then is what we call vertical structural transformation. This means not going from traditional agriculture to manufacturing, but rather within each sector, we need to have more workers being employed in more productive firms that are using more and more advanced production systems. Only a few sectors have had a more dramatic transformation than agriculture and agribusiness. Agriculture is not what you are seeing on the slide. Agriculture is also this. Along the border, the most advanced and most modern farms are using advanced production methods. They're using precision agriculture, drones, sensors, big data. And in fact, along the border, agriculture is becoming more and more a technological industry. And upstream, if we think about this, there are also developments in genetics, for instance, like those that are being done at centers like CIMMYT, where plants and animals are being generated of a better quality that are pest resistant. And downstream, we also see more sophisticated packaging methods that are using very sophisticated and automated sorting methods so that each client can receive their products according to their own specific specifications. And logistics has become more and more sophisticated as well. At the same time, there are many, many dramatic changes on the side of production, but also on the side of demand. As the population becomes wealthier and diversifies their diets in developing countries, certain products like fruits, vegetables, and meat are facing more and more dynamic supply. Consumers in developed countries are demanding their favorite products to be available all year long. This includes the counter season. This generates very important opportunities for the countries and for the companies that can meet these demands. So particularly for the countries that have competitive advantages in these products, this is a sector that has become increasingly attractive. However, success in this sector is not automatic, does not occur right away. Supermarkets and companies are demanding products that meet more stringent quality and safety standards, a longer shelf life, and they demand that these products were produced in a environmentally sustainable and environmentally friendly way. And consumers want more information. They need more information. They want to know how the products that they are consuming were produced, whether they were produced that are environmentally friendly, whether they have been produced using fair trade practices. So they are becoming more and more demanding. Meeting the demands of both the buyers like supermarkets and processing companies and the demands of consumers themselves requires new capabilities. These new capabilities are needed at the level of the companies and also at the level of the countries. What explains the successful integration in agri-food markets? What kind of strategies are required by companies in order to be successful? How is it that companies can support their companies when they are seeking success? What can they do so that these successful experiences are more sustainable and more inclusive? This is the kind of questions that we tried to answer in this report. To do this, we coordinated more than 30 case studies of international successful insertion or integration in agri-food markets. These studies were carried out in 12 countries and they cover a broad range of both products and services, from fresh products like fruits, vegetables, meat, processed foods like dried mangoes that have been dried in solar dryers, gourmet chocolate, and even specialized supplies and services like improved species or alt-tech services, high-tech services, the development of new varieties or the adaptation of new varieties or certain varieties to the local conditions. The case studies show that there is no single recipe for success. We identified 6 strategies for uh, adding value or for value adding. Which are these 6 strategies for adding value? I'm going to mention them as if they were independent. However, there are many companies that are combining several of these 6 strategies, and they are not necessarily independent. The first 4 that I'm going to mention are focused or targeted to fresh products, and the latter 2 to process products. The first one is fundamental, that is a sine qua non condition to enter into international markets, that is to say, to comply with the basic requirements of external markets. I'm referring to the requirements that are imposed by governments and also by the private buyers that at times more demanding than the requirements that have been established by the governments themselves. Obviously, behind these business strategies, we need to have the public goods that make these strategies public. We cannot think about complying with basic requirements of these markets without having proper bodies or organizations in charge of food safety, of food security, etc. A second strategy that we identified was obtaining attribute credentials like organic certification or fair trade certification. This allows us to taking care of the market niches that value these attributes. These attributes are non-observable to consumers, and that's why certification processes are required. But the third strategy has to do with developing products that are much observable and they are much valued by consumers, like tangerines that can easily be peeled off, sweeter cranberries, and products with a longer shelf life. Behind this, there are also public goods, like the research institutes allowing to generate certain varieties that have these qualities. And the fourth strategy has to do with using the time windows when there is a low supply. Research and genetic studies are important here so that we can generate varieties that can be produced, that can be reaped during these time windows, or that may be produced in other regions in the country where we can have earlier or later crops. And we're going to later on see examples of this strategy. Regarding the derivative products, and at times we have a complementary relationship between fresh and derivative products. At times, due to cosmetic reasons, there are certain products that do not meet the quality and or to qualify as fresh products. However, they can be perfectly well utilized if they are processed. So there is this complementary relationship. So we have examples of this, which are lime essential oils, organic purees, and so on. The sixth strategy has to do with brand differentiation, as is the case of Pacari Gourmet chocolates. That was part of one of the case studies that we carried out. We identified then these six strategies for adding value, but we also identified three models for productive organization. The first one is the vertical integration model. We studied a company in Argentina. They are the number one processor of lemon in the world. Why is it that companies decide to integrate themselves vertically? Well, vertical integration allows for a greater control of the productive process. The transaction cost of assuring that the quality and safety standards are met and that are more demanding on the side of buyers and supermarkets or third parties become greater. These costs increase, particularly if you try to work with small farmers. Yes, the vertical integration allows you to have a better control of the productive process, but it also allows you to quickly react to the changes in the market and in the demand. I'm going to give an example, the example of Camposol. Camposol is one of the largest agri-food businesses in Latin America. They are based in the Peruvian coast in lands that used to be desert, but they were irrigated with the irrigation infrastructure projects implemented by the Peruvian government in the 70s, the 80s, and so on. Originally, Campo Sol, it was purchased by Dyer Coriat Group in 2007. They were specialized in asparagus. They were the number one producers of asparagus. However, there was a problem with asparagus that which is that they were uh, marketed in cans as without much room for differentiation on for to provide very high returns. So Camposol divided it to diversify and market other products. They decided to market Hass avocado. This is a product that was not produced in Peru. So they started investigating. They discovered Hass avocado and found out that Peru could be a good producer of avocado. They decided to start producing it. Production increased very rapidly. 2 years after they started producing avocado, they became the number one producers of Hass avocado. Avocado and asparagus were both focused on the European market. No, asparagus was focused in the European market. Now that they had avocado, they focused on the Latin American and American market. They were able to enter the US market thanks to the commercial integration agreement that Peru had signed with the United States in 2009. This is another example of a public good that allows developing certain business strategies. Exactly what they did with avocado, they did with cranberry, which was also a fruit that did not exist in Peru. There is a company that developed certain varieties of cranberries, Incas berry. Camposol worked with Incas berries to start to grow cranberry in Peru. In the United States, it was consumed during the summer and then during the Chilean window of December and January. But after the US summer, before the Chilean time window, there was excess demand for it, for blueberry. And so Camposol took advantage of this. They quickly deployed, they rapidly changed the crops, and they very soon became the first world exporters of blueberry. This gave them a very important commercial advantage. They were the only ones who had blueberry available in October and November. So they were these products were purchased by supermarkets, bypassing the intermediary. So they were able to get 5 extra points as a return rate. So the returns with the blueberry were extremely high at the very beginning. It was important to deploy this very, very fast before the other competitors would try to get into the market. A few years later, and after they became the number one blueberry producers in the world, they were only controlling 20% of total exports of blueberry. What are then the keys of the Camposol model? Well, number one, we have the large scale, the agility to quickly reconvert the crops, a very strong commercial and financial capability to have a rapid reconversion capability, and total vertical integration. It allowed this very aggressive reconversion. It would have been very difficult with having third parties producing, for instance, in crops like avocado and blueberry that were not that did not exist in Peru. It would have been very difficult to achieve this very quick reconversion using third-party producers. The agility combined with the scale is what allowed to capture the benefits of investment before the new indicators would come in, because we know that they would have to appear inevitably. Camposol, as I mentioned before, bet on direct for investment. Once you get into to sell to supermarkets, they want you to sell them not only during a certain one season, they want you to sell to them all year long. This led them to sell avocado to Colombia and blueberries to Mexico, for instance. But these opportunities of value chains in the agri-food system, they not only generate opportunities for big companies like Camposol, they also generate many opportunities involving the small farmers through the two models that we're going to address. Number one, the trailblazing companies. They are defined as medium-sized or large companies that group hundreds or thousands of small farmers. They provide them with technical assistance and funding, and they help them connect with the rest of the world. Why purchase from third parties instead of producing products themselves? Well, probably the trailblazing company has no access to the land because it is fragmented or it is not available. They may be more efficient using the scarce capital to strengthen distribution channels, using the packaging plants instead of investing that in supplies and salaries. There are scale economies in processing and packaging so that even if they have their own production, they can complement it with the production of third parties in order to make those investments more profitable. But at times, purchasing from small farmers that are third parties allows them to reach socially responsible niches that appreciate those products. And at times, the commercial relations with small farmers may improve their corporate image, relations with the community, reduce the risk of social conflict, etc. For small farmers, the value of partnering with someone is huge. This allows them to meet very demanding standards that are demanded by international buyers to obtain certifications, to increase productivity. One of our colleagues have called this the fence of quality. And this model allows to dilute the fixed cost in order to overcome this fence. This is a case of group certifications that reduce costs for small farmers if they want to be certified. It allows to obtain better prices for the supplies, knowledge about good practices, or what clients want. Trailblazing companies provide technical assistance, access to certifications, to funding, and they coordinate the value chain. Financing is key. Funding is key because more farmers require funding. They need working capital, but they usually have no access to funds. Trailblazing companies do have access to funds. And they also have privileged information about each of the suppliers. They know them, so they have the perception of the risk of each of these suppliers, and this is different from what the bank may say. They may discount the funding at the time of the when they reap the products. So this is resolved. These asymmetries of information are resolved in the relationship between the provider and the client. Happens because at times the small farmers don't have access to funding. Of course, that the trailblazing company model does not free of risk. There is a problem of appropriability because they may sell to a third party. The producers may sell to a third party who is not the trailblazing company, even if the latter provided with them with technical assistance and funding. But there is something, a useful mechanism to address this, which is group certifications. The trailblazing company is the one that obtains certification for providers. They pay the administrative costs associated with this. They are the owners. They hold the certification, and the small farmer may sell is certified by the trailblazing company. They may sell to third parties, but there needs to be a price fee due to the certification. So this creates a commitment between the trailblazing company and the producers or the small farmers. Not all small farmers have access to the trailblazing company model. At times, the public sector provides public goods like roads, irrigation systems, and funding. They may play a key role so that more small farmers may access to the model.
Good example of this model, and I say this, and also in Peru and in Westphalia, Fruit for Peru. It's very interesting because Westphalia in Peru produces avocado just like Camposol with vertical integration processes. However, they realized that there was a great opportunity in Peru, and that is if instead of planting avocado in the sea, in the shores of the seaside, they plant them in the jungle where the market is not very well supplied, and they can ask for premium prices. In the mountain range, land tenure is completely different. Camposol has thousands of hectares at the seaside. However, in the mountain range, the land tenure is highly fragmented, and they have to work with many small growers. So Westphalia uses this kind of trailblazing companies processes, and they can ask for much higher prices than the price that they charge during May until June. This is a wonderful example. And of course, Westphalia also provides technical assistance, global gap certification to their growers network, etc. Another great example of a trailblazing company is Westphalica. They started producing dry fruit in solar dryers at Nicaragua. They began in 2007 with the idea of transforming the small farmers, fruit of small farmers, to organic agriculture and to connect them with international markets. They have their own team of agronomists. More than 18 agronomists work with over 1,000 small growers. They pay for the group organic certification. Growers can sell to third parties, but can only sell their organic products through Sol Orgánica. They buy inputs in great volumes on credit, and they give credit to the growers. They also allocate collection centers which are pretty close to the growers. Before, the growers had to take their products into the marketplace by bus and to longer distances, and it was very expensive. And this has a great impact on growers. This relationship either with trailblazing companies or with cooperatives. And in the case of Sol Orgánica, their well-being has increased greatly, as well as their standards of living. And at a given time, they realize that there are some limits to their capability of processing fruit in these solar dry flyers, because their footprint is higher. The fruit has to be dried out during 18 hours. And they realize that producing purees or juices out of organic fruit can be done at a faster speed, and this allows them to integrate a larger number of small growers in the network. So they diversify, and at the same time, they go from selling by retail or small supermarkets and independent cooperatives, and they go to sell through Amazon and GoFoods, and they start producing ingredients with the business-to-business model. Who buy these ingredients? Well, large corporations. They are drawn due to the social and environmental impact that these processes have. Like, for instance, in Ocean Drinks, they belong to Coca-Cola, but they buy from them. Happy Family from Danone, and they manufacture baby food. Patagonia Provisions, they belong to Patagonia government brand, but they have incursionated in this regenerative agriculture line. This story is great, and I think that it can be replicated in other countries and in other places. The third model that we have is the cooperatives and associations of small growers. This picture is belongs to one of the cases that we studied, Tanaki. It is a cooperative of quinoa in Bolivia plains. And this horizontal partnership model is another model that allows small growers to reduce their cost and overcome the quality barrier. In cooperation, they can reduce their individual costs, they get good practices, modern applications, they spread out the investment cost in terms of equipment, and they obtain certifications, and they process information on the markets. Besides, they have access to better input prices. And in general, the horizontal partnership or the cooperatives processing line also improves the social fabric. It allows to solve conflicts and the communities can defend their political and environmental interests. And they are much more successful if NGOs and public organizations can be brought into these models because they can help them. And there is also the fact of free riding. If some members do not receive the same, all the members receive the same benefit, regardless their individual performance. However, they strive for it, otherwise they affect the name of the cooperative, and they can be into real trouble. Many times the cooperatives come out in response to subsidies, and when this happens, then overall they do not work so well. And if the subsidy ends up, typically the cooperative also gets to an end. There are several factors which tie up the members of the cooperative within their communities. And it's also very important to have human resources with enough capability of leadership and good management to survive. Another beautiful case is Copsol. They produce organic honey at El Chaco in Argentina. It's a wonderful case which has also been shown in detail in the briefings. And we also have many other cases of vertically integrated companies, trailblazers, as well as cooperatives. How can we define the different business strategies? In the book, we give emphasis to the role of public goods. This is Cablicochi project in Peru that is allowing to irrigate a very large number of hectares in the Peruvian coastline. And that's why companies like Camposol exist. Without this kind of irrigation projects, without these public assets, it would be impossible to think in irrigating this area. Another examples of public assets can be seen in the exports of Mexican pork meat to Japan. The case of this company, which is located close to Merida, Yucatan, and they export pork meat, both frozen as well as fresh, and differentiated products like these brochettes, pork belly brochettes, which go directly through intermediaries to the supermarkets in Japan. Mexico has entered into a trade agreement with Japan, which allows it to have several tariff advantages. But the most important thing is that this trade agreement allowed for Senacica, to the Plant Health Agency in Mexico, to work with their counterparts in Japan. So they resolved many phytosanitary issues. And through this kind of fora, Mexico was able to introduce into Japan pork meat. It is considered free from African pork fever. This is the first case. Without this great work of Senacica with its counterparts, it would have been impossible to take advantage of these opportunities, even though we had Mexico had a trade agreement with it. And see, this is a table showing exports of Mexican pork meat into Japan. Mexico is responsible for almost 9% of those exports, whereas Chile, the other country, which is a major exporter of pork meat from Latin America, concentrates almost 3% of pork meat exports into Japan. Compare this to Korea, where Mexico does not have a trade agreement and pays 30% trade tariff. Chile does have this trade agreement and has almost 8% of the market share, whereas Mexico only has 2%. See the importance of public assets. Another good example of public asset is the study that we conducted on Mi Fruta, a company, a cooperative, an association of small growers from Chile that worked with traditional agriculture. And despite that, they are producing a great table grape, Maize, with royalty, a variety, a grape that has a great size and great taste. And thanks to the consortium that bred this new variety, this consortium, Mi Fruta, can work with this new variety. And there are also some companies that have this royalty grape. I'm sorry, this grape on the royalties. However, according to an agreement, only small growers within the association can produce this variety. Another example, which is also close to the example that we have seen already and can be done through research institutions, it is quarantenary treatment for Argentinian lime. Argentina is the leading producer of lime for processing, but they are also improving in terms of fresh lime. And the fruit, according to the quarantenary measures, has to be during 19 days at 1.5 degrees Celsius to eliminate the white fly, which is, or the fruit fly, which is precisely the objective of this quarantenary treatment. But it also ruined the lime quality. At Tucumán, which is the lime producing region in Argentina, there is Obispo Colombes experimental station, and they produce an alternative quaternary treatment. Now the line goes into a treatment for 42 days at a higher temperature, and then the white fly is killed without affecting the quality. Now, through negotiations, this quaternary treatment has been accepted. This is another example how a research institute, in this case with public funding, can create businesses or can enable companies to develop certain strategies that wouldn't be possible without the support of the public sector. Another great example, how can we identify the public assets that are required and articulate the value chains? There are several examples. For instance, in Argentina, there is a close cooperation between CAPSI, which is the cherry growers Argentinian Chamber, and NEUNICEN, the Economic Development Agency, and SENASA. And thanks to those negotiations, Argentina can go into the Chinese market by recognizing that this area is free from fruit fly. The negotiations were long, but that role they played was crucial. And there are also some public-private sectorial fora in Peru that enable to identify and rapidly solve obstacles for the development of a sector. For instance, in fisheries, they created CIMMYT in these tables. However, Peru couldn't be a major actor in fisheries without the support of CIMMYT. New possibilities for this sector were opened through those works. FIRA, we talked about it during breakfast. It's a development bank in Mexico that works with private funding institutions, and it's a second floor or second tier banking. They work with trailblazing companies to provide credit to the agricultural sector, to small growers, and they support value chain. There are very interesting examples in the region that are worthwhile getting to know. Well, these are the subjects that I wanted to show you in this report. And then Gustavo Crespi and Romina Ordóñez will talk about their own chapters as their leaders. In the case of Gustavo, I don't know exactly what's the order in the agenda, but Gustavo will talk about innovation and Romina will talk about sustainability. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ernesto, for this fantastic presentation. It's so difficult, really, to show the importance of this report that only in 30 minutes, such a huge report summarized greatly in only 30 minutes. So now we will ask Valeria Piñeiro from CGIAR, the leader of the Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, from the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, with headquarters in Washington, to add on to your presentation in representation of CGIAR. Valeria, welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. We can't hear you well, Valeria. Maybe it's the volume here, or hold on. I will wear the headsets. Can you hear me better? Can you get closer? Yes, much better. Thank you. Okay, you have 10 minutes. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Joaquin for his invitation. I would like to thank CIMMYT for organizing this event and to congratulate all the IDB team, Gustavo, Romina, Ernesto. Thank you so much to all of you, and also to the rest of the collaborators and the IDB team who prepared this report. This report was excellent in terms on how you join in a very flowable manner topics which are common to Latin America and the Caribbean. And you are reflecting a reality, how these challenges, these current challenges are being faced within the region. This transformation of the productive system, how these value chains are integrated through a recreation of the productive sector, the increase of productivity or yields, and how the role of the government in the production of these public assets is outstanding, as well as the relationship between the public and private sectors, so that we can have these productive sectors whereby the region can grow, and we still have to work on them. Now, each chapter was very interesting. Each chapter has its own subject, but in a very comprehensive way, you take things from the general context into very concrete examples, which illustrate successful stories, outstanding the particular details of each one of them, and then how you put them into the context within which we are analyzing all these examples. This report comprises in total the whole region with its opportunities and challenges locally, nationally, as well as worldwide. So with the few minutes that I have left, Joaquin already told me that are only 10. So I would only like to pinpoint 3 challenges that I believe this region has in order to end up with some remarks of general nature. Going into the 3 challenges, the first one is, how can we produce a diversified basket of nourishing food, but also in sufficient quantity? At the same time, we also have the responsibility of producing, but lowering the GHG emissions, and also reducing the impact on natural resources. So achievement of these 3 objectives requires a highly integrated strategy, considering the environmental sustainability, high productivity, high yields, sustainable production, and also sustainable use of natural resources, land, water, and also some inputs such as fertilizers and energy. The second challenge that I see here is, how can we produce more with less? And therefore, what we have to do is to ensure the fact that there is always a disruptive technology available, the existence of the intermediary organizations within scientific knowledge, and the specific need, dealing with the specific needs of that productive sector, and also alliances of stakeholders that can enable to move the mechanism of institutions, and at the same time generating demand for those goods. And the third goal would be how to become part of those markets. How can we reach them? How can we have access to it? Consumers, countries are demanding more specific products, as the report says, and with particularities of for each specific market. And also we have to work more on certifications, food safety, labeling, group certificates, and how to harmonize somehow those systems, because if we do not reach this harmonization or standardization, what we will have is higher costs for growers, and in many cases there will be new non-tariff barriers. So that's a huge challenge also where we have to work at. And obviously the key then is to find which are those proper incentives, both at the short and at the long terms, in order to comply precisely with the goal of transforming the agri-food system. And specifically with this report, we are seeking to have these sustainable productive sectors. And whenever we talk about sustainability, we talk about the economic, the social, and also the environmental protection areas. Something else that has been emphasized on is the political environment, and how this political environment related to the agri-food system has a major impact in safety and environmental sustainability. And for me, in this case, there are 4 drivers: how much we produce, what we produce, where we produce, and when we produce. So as it has been said, the solutions will be based upon innovation. What would that region have to do in order to foster this innovation? By innovation, we mean the three pillars: innovation at a political level, technological innovation, but also innovation at the institutional level, as Ernesto has said. Regulations, etc., are of utmost importance. So these are the three main pillars of innovation, and we must understand them well. Why? Because we have to use them in order to define the policies, technologies, and the institutions that are necessary. Their design, where we have to promote, and then specifically how should we promote them. Because if we just remain at the first level, we won't achieve anything. We want to implement these policies, and we want to adopt these technologies in order to have the necessary changes for the growth of the region and the productive sector, the livestock and farming sectors in those regions. I loved the chapter where you mentioned about how to establish the basis for the innovative system. It has to be accompanied by a good business environment according to the development of innovating companies. And it says, which includes the development of a fiscal policy that will foster investment, a labor regulation that will promote the development of the sector, relationship with other countries, and the necessary enabling infrastructure. I believe that this captures very well what we have to do in order to go forward. Obviously, the macroeconomic of the country is important, the economic stability and the stability of the policies is also important in order to create the right environment for local investment, and also in order to attract external investments. On the other hand, and it has been mentioned as well, we have to understand the concept. Not all growers are the same, not all countries are the same, and above all, within the country, there are also many localities which are completely different among themselves. To end up, I would like to say that everything that we have been talking about is highly interconnected, and naturally what we have to do is to understand, or to concentrate in understanding, how these connections work, which are the trade-offs that come out from it. When we talk about sustainability in the productive sector, we want to see it from the three pillars that I mentioned: economic, social, and the environmental pillar. Many times, if we increase production, the emissions will increase, but we will reduce slightly food security issue. So what can we give and what can we receive in order to supplement and do the right trade-offs? And obviously, we cannot forget that we have to achieve the implementation of policies, the adoption of technologies, as it was well said in this report. I would like to say once again, congratulations to the DV team for this excellent report. Valeria, thank you very much for your reflections. In order to start this interaction between IDV and CGIAR, your comments and your remarks are welcome. Thank you very much. Now we'll go on into innovation in modern agriculture chapter. Gustavo Crespi, lead expert of the competitiveness division, technology and innovation of the IDB, who is already in line, will talk to us about this chapter. Can you hear me? I have an issue here. I cannot connect the screen. I will share this presentation.
Muy bien, a ver, lo que voy a contar un poco un resumen bien breve de lo que es el capítulo.
A brief summary of this chapter 9 in the report.
Y viéndolo desde el punto de vista de alguien que, si bien, como mi persona, ha estudiado procesos de innovación,
well,
comparto también el sesgo de la profesión de los que nos dedicamos.
Since I have been studying in innovation, I will talk about why we start talking about innovation. First, we have to understand how a specific economy considers innovation. And that's why I studied chapter 9 in this report from that standpoint. Agriculture hasn't been treated very well by the economy of innovation. And this is according to authors like Schumter, Freeman, Pavitt, Abramowitz, Hall, etc. Now, innovation is based on some specific sectorial characteristics like products which are produced in an atomized manner. They produce goods that are little differentiated. They are commodities really with specific learning cycles that are very long and they are conditioned by natural phenomena. The traditional vision is that the sector has been dominated by the suppliers. Their sources are external technologies. The growers are quite sensitive to price and they are always focusing on cost reduction. So this sector is considered little innovator, you know. So more or less, this is the vision that we have. Like Ernesto said, a sector that uses very little technology, a sector that is seen from the outside, that is creating soil or erosion with low productivity, that the work is repetitive and they are not creating new skills. There is very little control. Now, as a consequence, since innovation in agriculture has not been the focus of these studies, manufacture has been historically the focus of the innovation economy due to its sectorial capacity, high productivity converging with international border, non-qualified or non-skilled labor, limited domestic market, clusters of customers and suppliers were created, generating capabilities. A traditional vision is that the sector is intensive, knowledge intensive. The source is endogenous technology, and this is where it comes. So this is what
and
we
this
had
is another
in mind.
figure that is based, that shows the perspective on innovation economy. Those that study innovation and the innovation processes has led to a very serious simplification of innovation processes in agriculture, not because of those who are working in agricultural innovation, but rather those that see this as a very innovative process. In agriculture, throughout decades, there have been productive and organizational significant transformation in the sector that have been underestimated. We currently are going through one of these transformations, and the purpose of this chapter was to study and document the underlying factors that make current modern agriculture to be seen as a value chain with abundant innovations throughout the chain. Modern agriculture now, in contrast with what we saw in the past, includes a stage of crop pre pre-harvesting, post-harvesting organizations, and this allows to have full control of the entire cycle. In the pre-growing stage, then we have the pre-harvesting that includes information centers to optimize the use of fertilizers, water, and pesticides, the use of knowing the optimum density of the crops, and post-harvesting includes the following. So if we want to understand all of these innovations that had been missed within the economy of innovation, then we need to consider this sectoral system. And this is what we tried to analyze, precisely this transformation in the sector, which is the sectoral system of agricultural innovation. We're going to see specifically what happens with agriculture, but this can be applied to other sectors as well. Something central in the innovation system is that we would like to study this in a sector system based on three functional blocks that can be considered as determining factors for innovation. Number one, the knowledge, the learning processes and technology, that is to say the knowledge basis of the system, the matter of what we are using. This is the frontier of knowledge, and this evolves in a disruptive way with very important parts that are missing. Second, the major players and the networks that are the organizations that produce, acquire, and use the knowledge together with knowledge interactions. And thirdly, the interactions as the set of norms, rules, routines, and practices that lead to configuring the cognitive actions of the stakeholders and their interactions. Let's address the first of these blocks. We're going to address them one by one. We might say that the sector has gone through four shocks. First of all, innovation in agriculture has been characterized by local specificity and changes in the biological ecosystem. A soy seed in Argentina does not work in the southern part of Brazil or in Asia, because these are different varieties and there are local specificities. At times, these systems are not fixed as happens in manufacturing. So there is a latent demand for specific knowledge and sort of a maintenance research so that we don't have loss of the yields of the different products. What is happening now is that to all of this, we need to add the acceleration resulting from climate change. The second shock has to do with the discrete knowledge, discrete changes in the frontier of knowledge. Historically, biology, genetics, chemistry, and more recently, data science, they have experienced all of these discrete changes. We always we seen important growth in the productivity of this sector that has to have to do with the shocks in the frontiers of knowledge in the fields of biology, genetics, chemistry, and most recently in what is known as data science. The third shock is the change in consumer preferences. We have gone from homogeneous products to functional products and organic products. And the fourth shock has to do with the new organizational models that have been disseminated and that are based on outsourcing more and more. When one of these shocks occurs, the sector receives an impact. What is natural is for these changes to lead to what we call a creative destruction or the shakeout, which is the production of new specialized companies that are trying to challenge the new paradigm. And there is the destruction of companies that have not adapted themselves to the shock. So there is an important reconfiguration of the system. But there is a reconfiguration on the side of the institutions as well. I would like to highlight the growing effects of sector regulations. Number one, in agriculture, the US agriculture system is the most regulated in the world. This is due to a regulatory system that focuses on new technologies of the sector based on the effects they have on the people and the environment. The development of a regulatory system, of course, affects the decision of to innovate, and also it also affects the direction of innovation. That is to say, where will innovation occur? At times, there is a regulatory hidden cost. This is a sunken cost that they necessarily have to pay for. There is the entrance of certain specialized companies that are complying with regulations. So innovation is given to certain companies that are fully compliant with regulations. A second effect has to do with strengthening of systems that protect intellectual property. to a great extent, this has been the result not of the growth within specific systems, but although this also happens, but this is due to the convergence that we have seen with the patent system based on the decision of the United States regarding patents. This has necessarily led to greater participation of private investments in research and development. This has led to the appearance of technologically based companies, but there is his focus on certain crops and countries. There are disbalances that have occurred, and as a result of this, their innovation focuses on certain crops and certain countries, because the strength of this system is not the same in all the crops and in all the countries. There is, we observed something interesting in the study, which is the stakeholders. The stakeholders in this chapter are those that have experienced the changes that I mentioned. We have a seed producing company, a Incas Berries, which is the company that marketed blueberries that was mentioned by Ernesto. Patagonian Fruits, that is was included in the chapter. We have companies like AIWA, a company that uses systems for genetic applications, Trasur, and Kilimo. I tried to, since I don't have much time, I tried to make a cross-section of what we see whenever we analyze the stakeholders. What are the patterns that we observed at the entry and growth of these companies, all of them knowledge intensive? Well, first of all, these are usually family companies who have prior knowledge of the sector because they are family companies, and they have are relatively new. They've been in the market for 6 to 7 years. Then disruptions. These are companies that have taken advantage of the shakeout. They have taken advantage of the opportunities generated by knowledge disruptions. In the case of GDM and Incas Berries in genetics, or data science in the case of AWA, Trasur, or Kilimo. And they have taken advantage of consumer preferences like Incas Berries, Patagonian Fruits, and taken advantages of regulations like Trasur. Thirdly, the open innovation. There are strong investments or very abundant investments in internal research and development, representing 10% of the sales. This is a world standard, 10% of the sales. And there are some of these companies that make huge investments in R&D. This is done, however, with a strong collaboration with the scientific system at the national and international level. They train human resources, obtain genetics, have access to information or data science platforms like satellite platforms, and they have lead users to test technology, adjust it, and scale it. And they partner with the lead users of the pioneer stakeholders so that they can together test technology, make the necessary adjustments, and scale it. For instance, a company that produces irrigation systems, they say, I need to speak with the major growers to know what kind of adjustments I have to make to my technology based on the productive cycles. So I need to interact with the lead users. The role of public institutions is seen more in the validation of technology than in the generation phase of knowledge, but so in the validation. In this model, we have science, we have the academia doing research, the Technologic Research Institute that transfers that knowledge and transfers to the growers that use that knowledge. Many of these companies work directly with the academia, and they use their research institutes to validate their technologies and to have contact with the lead users. And then in all of the business cases, with the exception of one of them, this is a business that is global. There is an internalization model with a global orientation that is consolidated. It is early, but it is based on direct foreign investment in the destination countries. Why? Because contextual knowledge only occurs if it comes from the country where I would like to enter into. So this is generated by looking for the reward of variety, but also due to the rapid saturation of the domestic market of original innovation due to heterogeneity of the sector. Another reason for this happening is that there are market limitations in extension systems. What happens is that it's difficult for these companies to cope with the heterogeneity in the sector in their own country. So it's easy to work to transfer technology, but when you have such a heterogeneous market, things become complicated. So this requires an extra effort in technology transfer. And there comes a time where this is not profitable for me as a company. So I would rather develop a similar crop. So instead of developing irrigation system for soybean, I generate systems for maize. Once I saturate this market, I go outside or I go to a different country. But if these extension systems do not exist, these public goods do not exist that allow me to apply this, then dissemination it would not be possible. What are the challenges to the growth of these companies? One of the major challenges that has been reported is informality regarding intellectual property protection, some of them for having to do with the genetic modification. The articulation cost, there is lack of instruments for alignment, a lack of incentives facilitating access to the scientific system. It is so most of the companies have a complex situation, and yes, there are many advantages of these incentives, but at times there is no access to these incentives, like, for instance, access to incubators for small companies and so on. This is what has been reported. The funding, there is lack of access to funding by the early entrepreneur, and escalation represents a limitation in some cases. Heterogeneity amongst producers and the lack of public-private partnerships of extensionism make the effective market to be saturated rather fast, even though the potential market is huge. And at times, the CTI politics is not consistent with the needs of the companies. The knowledge and technological policy does not meet the demands. For instance, there is the demand of in the case of genetic companies in Argentina, they are developing seeds that adapt rapidly to local conditions. They use genetics, they use genetically modified organisms that they obtain or they're purchased from international providers. In the Argentinian scientific system, this cannot always be validated, the use of genetically modified organisms. So they don't find in the scientific policy of their country certain policy goals that can be that are targeted to the needs that companies have. In conclusion, I would like to make 6 recommendations. First of all, agriculture involves an intensive science-based innovation process that requires improvement, collaboration, instruments, and technology transfers with university. This has been driven by the providers. This is a sector that has moved towards intensive innovation that is science-based. So we need collaboration with universities, with the academia. This is a sector that requires facilitating access to information coming from public databases. At times, access to this kind of data is complex. At one of the meetings that we held, there was a company that packages satellite information for Peruvian growers. They said that it was not easy to purchase satellite information in Peru from Argentina. This is despite the fact that the Peruvian space company had already purchased that information from Argentina, or they needed to be more open to the development of new products and opportunities. This is something that we have found several times. At times, public institutions are aimed at incremental improvement additional to what was already being done or was being produced. However, this plays an important role whenever these are new products. In the case of blueberry, there can be certain breeding strategies, and this is what happens when there is a new grower coming to these countries. Something similar happened in Uruguay. We need to strengthen the intellectual property systems, correcting their imbalances and facilitating compliance with them. This affects local seed companies. This, in Argentina and Uruguay, the seed companies are the major innovators. They drive innovation in Argentina and Uruguay. Who invests more in innovation? Well, of course, all companies. But after all companies, the seed producing companies are the ones that invest the most in innovation. They, on the one hand, in the case of their supplies, which are genetically modified or developed organisms, they are protected by patents. So this makes them be in a weak situation compared to growers or producers like Monsanto. But on the other hand, they are protected by certain mechanisms. So it is increasingly difficult for them to innovate, and so they have to reach agreements with the external providers or suppliers. I would suggest that we need to strengthen sector regulators in aspects that have to do with export and import of genetic material, among others. And this represents a very important factor for development. An example of this is Peru. We need to promote ecosystems for innovative entrepreneurship in the sector so that they can provide a service sector. There is the perception that there is a good potential between the entrepreneurs, lead users, and the academia, but these links, these relations are not occurring because there is no communication among the systems, or they are looking at a different side. We need to promote public-private dialogue and public-private coordination at the sectoral level to promote trust and generate social capital, which is something extremely important. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gustavo, for this presentation on innovation in modern agriculture. Hugo Campos, our guest representing CGIAR, will make his comment from Peru. He's Assistant Director of Research at Potato International System. Hugo, we are a bit running a bit late, but we would like to hear your perspective. Thank you very much. Can you hear me and see me okay? I would like to begin by sharing with you the following. This event, 5 to 10 years from now, this event is going to represent a watershed. First of all, because this is a very relevant document generated by the IADB and generated by IADB colleagues. It has been communicated, it has been disseminated with one CGIAR. So this represents an invitation. This is a commitment so that this can really lead to a turning point on how we can have innovation that generates value in agriculture. I really liked Gustavo's opinion. I don't like the fact that in agriculture innovation, we are treated like the poor relatives. This is how we are treated. Let me give you a piece of information. Today, it takes 2 seconds to produce 1 kilo of wheat. This is what agricultural innovation has achieved with time. These are extraordinary results, as extraordinary as those happening in other areas. Allow me to focus on 4 messages. Number 1, it is a fallacy to say that fallacy occurs without the participation of the state. We have known effects. For instance, the iPhone would not exist without 20 years of investigation and commitment of the state to generate research and the proper regulatory framework in the United States. The role of the state has changed. In the past, it was R&D and generate investments. The miracle of blueberry in Peru would not have occurred without the investment of the Peruvian state. However, currently, the role of the state has changed. Today, they need to provide appropriate conditions, a regulatory framework, be a facilitator, because the state is one of the major creators of jobs. In innovation, we should not forget that in Latin America, the great generators of jobs are small and medium-sized or very small companies. This is at the aggregate level. So the current role of the state to support innovation is fundamental in the creation of support of startups to reduce the financial risk of the startups and to stabilize the labor market. This does not mean to make it more precarious. The innovation without considering the role of the state is a fallacy. It does not exist today, it did not exist in the past, but the role of the state is there and we need to support it. Second, the creative destruction that Gustavo referred to, a Schumpeter's concept, it does exist in agriculture. An example is that for many years, a company was leader in exports in the southern cone. The same thing happened with asparagus, avocado, and potato, as it is known in Chile and Peru. Within the same concept, something similar happened in Paris when we had a very short agricultural season in Brazil that became the great driver of maize export in Brazil. So we need to utilize how we use public support so that innovation can generate value in a sustainable way, as has happened with the avocado. And my contribution to the dialogue of innovation and to accept the value of innovation in agriculture has to do with the business model. The business model is much more relevant than the product or service I would like to take to the market. At times, the product is not that relevant. What is fundamental is to have a value proposition, the good intellectual property, and to develop key mechanisms and key stakeholders. We cannot bring innovation to a larger scale in Latin America if we continue to conceptualize it from the perspective of the product or service. What is fundamental is the business model. It is critical to have a value creating innovation. And one last point that I would like to share with you, because we are running out of time, is as follows. I think that much of the dialogue has focused on the role of the state, the role of the private sector, and also in the importance of R&D. But today we have to go beyond this. This triple model has evolved. Today we are a five-party elite. We have to add to these three elements, first of all, the society as a whole, and explicitly the contribution to the Millennium Development Goals for Sustainable Development. So we needed to evolve towards a bit more sophisticated system in which the society as a whole will participate. Today it's not enough to have a patent protection or without social conscience, social awareness, or without having the explicit participation, the support of society to operate in a certain territory. There is no patent that allows me to operate or generate value. We need to have a social validation in the front of the society. This is fundamental. And the last element is very important. One of the things that are discussed within the field of innovation, and I'm referring to the experience of other realms, is how can we achieve this? Well, what can we achieve if we correct the market flaws? Had we not corrected the market flaws, we would not have internet or artificial intelligence. Within the framework of innovation, instead of focusing on solving the market flaws, from my perspective, I think that we need to go to a different stage where we need to have innovation with a mission where we can focus on the mission of generating values. And there are another concept. We need to think about development in 15 years to create sustainable values, to do this in an inclusive way in Latin America, regardless of the school of thought where we are. How reduce inequality without forgetting the gender. In Latin America, we continue to be weak regarding the gender perspective. My comments, Gustavo's presentation, and the book as a whole will allow us to make this event represent a watershed, a turning point, because we will be able to have innovation go to the next level in order to improve the capacity of farmers to generate value. But we also need to be able to help them improve their quality of life.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Thank you for your comments. Thank you very much for your help. Your presentation has been quite interesting, especially because, as you said, it has to be a point of inflection. Now I'm going to invite Romina, this from IDB. She will talk about the value creation strategies vis-a-vis the environmental challenges in global values. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you see me now? I'm Romina Ordóñez, and thank you very much for your invitation. My purpose is in the next 10 minutes, and I'm sorry that I'm going to put it like this. Let's see if you can see it better. Okay. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you the works of the main of the chapters. You can see the title there. In this chapter, we're going to analyze how environmental challenges have an impact in the international vision or value of many companies. I developed this work with Johanna Kraus from FAO and Mrs. Cruiser from Argentina. Well, we're going to talk about this very obvious concept, this complex relationship between environment and agricultural resources. This sector requires strongly of natural resources in order to produce, and at the same time, it has a huge impact. We also know that this sector has had great growth in productivity, in yields in the last decades, but we also know that it has had a great impact on environment. All of us who work in this sector know exactly which challenges represent, which are the challenges that are more frequently faced by our farmers worldwide, like for instance, changes in the quality and quantity of water, degradation of soils and ecosystems, extreme climate events, which are more frequent. And I would also like to share a comment from Valeria. The challenge for growers is not only to adapt themselves, that is to work resiliently to the changes of environmental degradation and climate change, but also reducing their own impacts in the farming systems, like for instance, reduced use of chemicals and less use of environmental inputs. This is the impact of the stakeholders. The private sector is seeking for business models based upon environmental criteria. Growers, as we said, are demanding more food. Consumers are demanding consciously or socially and environmentally consciously produced food. The systems, there is the need for knowledge and technology in order to have cleaner and more efficient technology, and the government, of course, in the role of regulating the environment and the public assets. Now, in response to these environmental challenges, actors also had an impact on other actors of the system. And at the same time, in order to turn these challenges in opportunities, their answers also have an influence, and they are interconnected with the answer of the other actors. What do we find in this review of case studies, including 30 of them, but at the same time they comprise more than 100 companies in the region? We found on the one side that the international insertion strategies of many agribusinesses in Latin America are limited due to their environmental challenges. And at the same time, these challenges create opportunities because they enable them to take advantage of market niches in highly developed countries, which pay high value to environmentally responsible production, and they are willing to pay for that. In fact, they demand certification, and they are even willing to pay for the economic and environmental services that are required for this kind of production. There are many examples of companies that decided to follow more resilient production models with lower environmental fingerprints. So we split them into these 4 categories that I'm going to mention. This includes the different cases that we find. The first one, and well known by everyone, is the organic production, which is a system that has had more growth in the system in the last 20 years globally, a little bit less years in this region. The second category that we call beyond the organic includes all the ecological, regenerative, biodynamic models without not only not the use of agrochemicals, but really contributing to regenerate the natural resources, the ecosystem, with a positive impact. For instance, regenerative agriculture is focused on improving quality and soil nutrition, depending on internal inputs to the system instead of on external systems to foster perennial crops instead of annual cropping. This will facilitate the carbon absorption, water conservation, etc., making these systems more resilient. The third category includes the agroforestry models. It's also including livestock based on natural grazing and also shading farming, which is quite extensive in our region. Number 4, what we have called taking advantage of losses in the productive process. These are companies that are looking to take advantage of those wastes of the productive process. avoiding the negative impact of the poor management of this waste on the environment, and instead they can produce food with high nutritional content, high demand, and high economic value. Now, which are the mechanisms that these companies have in order to add value to these productive models? On the one hand, we know that most consumers cannot see the way in which their food is produced. And that's why they have to resort to third parties, to certifying bodies that can ensure the production, the way in which their food was produced. In developed countries, the consumers are quite aware about the impact that their consumption decisions have on ecosystems versus the climate change. And that's why they are willing to pay price premiums for these validations, these certifications, these attributes related to sustainability of the food production process. That's what explains the large number of certifying entities in this sector. And these premium prices are helping to offset the growers, the cost of this transition from the traditional or conventional production models to these more resilient production processes. Less disseminated than the case of certifications, of course, is the case of payments for environmental services. Growers are seeking to improve their cost and the environmental benefits of their production models. For instance, the carbon bonds, which can be used in transactions in order to compensate the carbon capture of some models, productive models, like for instance, the agroforestry or resilient model of agroforestry. And this is not only helping the environment, but it's helping the farmers because they are receiving payment or they're charged for these bonds. Besides the crop, you have this additional income for this carbon bond. And in this area, we still have a long way to go. And I would like to close with some examples of the case studies, just to illustrate what I have been telling you. I will split this information into the 4 categories. First, organic production. In this category, we find many examples, but I only brought 3. One from Bolivia, the company Pronam, that groups more than 300 small growers of organic produce. Pronam is exporting in 17 years ago to Germany, and they pay their growers, which are certified and as organic, a 15% premium price versus the common or the traditional peanut growers. And we also have this Fortaleza del Valle, an association that comprise 14 small growers of cocoa. Most of their exports go into Switzerland. This cocoa, organic cocoa, is used in order to produce gourmet products. In Argentina, we have the small enterprise that CIMMYT. They produce organic fruit purees used as imports for other products like baby food. Phoenix is exporting to large multinationals like Danone and Coke, and 40% of their production is already organic. In the case of the beyond organic category, we have Sol Simple. This example has been already been mentioned by Ernesto. In Nicaragua, Patagonian fruits also has been mentioned. They produce fruit and apples that are considered biodynamic in Argentina. And Guayaquil is quite a special case, because it shows many of the things that I've been talking about in one single case. Guayaquil produces energy drinks based on yerba mate. Yerba mate is produced by small growers. They produce organic products under shading in Nicaragua, Paraguay, and Brazil. Since its origins in the 90s, Guayaquil was seeking to create a model which was not only profitable, but also they were looking to regenerate the ecosystems. Guayaquil got a certification as organic producer. Rock Sol Simple also got this certification. And on the other hand, which is also, and that's also interesting because it's on how work for pioneers, is that they decided to compensate economically the use of water that is used in their plantations in the south. They decided to compensate or reward economically the people who live along the Amazonas River, where rainfall falls into those rivers, and this water reaches the southern region, which is key to the growers in that area. The growers that work at Guayaquil, they entered into an agreement with Gaia Foundation from Colombia, and they provide for these people who live in the Amazonian River. And this is just to signal, I was talking to their CEO once, and they said, well, I know that this is something very little, but one of our goals is to set an example and to show which things can be done and the importance of being able to compensate us in order to continue producing food. On the other hand, we, in the case of Guayaquil that I had mentioned recently, we also have this Mercon. Mercon is the main coffee marketer in Latin America, and it's also part of IDB. Mercon has many suppliers, many small growers that provide to them in Central America. I'm talking about thousands of small growers. They grow coffee under shadowing conditions. They have a very strong technical assistance program. It lasts 3 years. Hundreds of growers have been graduated from this program, and they have a major focus on sustainable coffee production practices. And what Melcon recently tried to go deeper into is to calculate the carbon emissions of these coffee growers so that they can be compensated economically by the environmental and social service they are providing. And they invented a calculator through which they estimate this economic reward. And on the other hand, on the other side of the chain, we have large producers, large retailers. They also want to pay for carbon bonds, and they're willing to pay a premium price for a coffee that was resiliently and sustainable produced. And Mercon is the linkage between both ends of the supply chain. And then the companies like Gion that is taking advantage of waste. They are producing these capsules, biofortune crops, for instance, also. In Gion, they produce capsules with high content of omega-3, and they use the waste of fish. Fishery is very important for the area where they get the waste from, and poor management of fish waste was creating lots of problems both in the sea as well and in the land. And now they are using this waste in order to produce this nutraceutical product. It has a high nutritional product, of course, but it also has high demand and high value. And lastly, the case of Biofortune, a company, a coffee company that decided to go far beyond the export of coffee, and they invested lots of resources and many years in research and development in order to take advantage of their product, which were traditionally considered as coffee waste. Like, for instance, coffee tree leaves or pulp, coffee pulp, in order to dry them, dehydrate them, and transform it into concentrated liquid that is used as input for nourishing drinks. In 2020, Biofortune made the first export of pulp and coffee leaves, and they got 30% higher price for those wastes than for the coffee that they export, the coffee grain. And this is a great example. And then the conclusions that we are drawing out from these examples. On the one hand, the production food models that are seeking for resilience of the sector and reduce their fingerprint are growing in the region. Exporting companies can be an agent of change, helping the transition, doing the transition into productive models with lower environmental impact. The transition to more sustainable production models, it all has an initial cost. Not all growers can face this cost, and this is creating a strong role for the public sector and the international entities to see how can we support this transition through funding, technical assistance, and dissemination. They can help a lot in this transition process. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you so much, Romina. As you said, the great challenge is seeking resilience in the system for long, medium, and short-term survival. And now we are going to invite Daisy Martinez, lead of the Integrating Regional Initiative AgriLag Resilient, so that she can talk about her insights. Thank you very much, Joaquin. Thank you very much, Romina, for sharing your thoughts and the main challenges that you made in this chapter. It was very interesting, very interesting. This chapter pinpoints the double role that Latin America has globally. On the one hand, food production. We produce a large diversity of food for the world. And on the other hand, the commitment and the capacity, the environmental potential that we have in order to ensure the sustainability of that production and the survival of everyone worldwide. And this chapter is also showing how it is possible to create value through environmental sustainability of livestock and farming production, and agricultural production, sorry. And I also believe that the message that gives us this chapter is that sustainable production should not be the extraordinary way of producing, but rather should become the rule. I mean, we should produce in a sustainable way, always trying to preserve our natural resources and continue producing nutritional rich food products for our children, for our families. And I believe that this is the way in which we can work together through our institutions, CGIAR and IDB, together with the strong resources that we have in our research institutions, so that sustainable food production will be the rule in the future in our societies. And also considering the main findings in this chapter, I can see that there is an opportunity so that all of us among the different institutions can truly establish processes to reinforce the capabilities of the innovation agri-food products and agri-food products, which are differing right now so much from one to one. Yes, they have been evolving. The structure of the innovation systems is not the same any longer as the one that we had decades ago. The times of innovation are shorter. However, the challenges are every day more complex, and we need innovative solutions considered from the multiplicity of the systems that we have within the agri-food system. And this is where we should include regional initiatives like AgriLag, Resilient AgriLag, which is part of the CGIAR portfolio, and we are seeking to strengthen the innovation systems. And this is, I am adding this comment to what Romina and other colleagues said in the document. We must understand first which are the reasons for growers to conduct innovation which are aligned with the environmental challenges. and the economic challenges as well. This is where we can help each other. Let's understand the challenges of these growers, not only a larger scale, but also small landholders. They must also strengthen their capabilities and have incentives enough to produce in a more sustainable way. We must understand also the barriers and the opportunities so that the models that we are showing in this report are not isolated success cases, but they are rather common cases of our regions, given the high productive potential that we have in Latin America, and also, of course, the high environmental potential that we have. Also, with regards to the role that you spoke about of public institutions and international cooperation, us as international research centers have much to contribute with in closing those knowledge gaps and increase the capabilities in those markets with all our key stakeholders with whom we're collaborating in every country. And this is precisely where we can work hand in hand, work together in order to strengthen these capabilities. 5 key topics that we work at Resilient Agri-Lab. And I believe that it has a great potential for collaboration based upon all the findings that we are describing in this report. One of them is to increase nutritional food security, which was greatly impacted during the pandemic and post-pandemic times. With regards to nutritional content, with strong scientific basis, also in terms of production, sustainable production. Are you hearing me? Because the image is frozen, says Daisy. Could you please confirm if you can hear Daisy correctly? For those of us who are virtually present, yes, I can hear you very well. Okay, thank you. Well, as I said, the nutritional and food security are very important, and they are combined through tailor-made innovations, addressing different types of grower groups. And we see fortification, healthy diets, diversified diets, that we can have access to this kind of diets, all of us in the society. This is crucial, not only thinking about the export potential that this region has, we must make our food more nourishing within this region, and then take all this concept into the international arena. Number two, we have to use tailor-made information in order to serve the different groups of growers. I'm talking about agricultural, climate information, market prices information. This information has to be focused on specific groups of growers so that they can make the best decisions at the right scale, using the right language on time, so that they can make timely and well-informed decisions. Now, considering all these opportunities for development and the goals also of mitigation of climate change, emission mitigation, etc., I bring this into the table once again because the huge role that this region has is the reduction of greenhouse gases and help agriculture to lower that huge environmental impact that is having currently. And that's crucial. We have to combine the reduction of emissions and the improvement of social development and goals, as well as their accomplishment. And on the other hand, how to work with all the stakeholders in terms of innovation in the region. What is this tailor-made innovation concept? We cannot do it by ourselves. We need actors like you at the IDB, but also local stakeholders, private players, the market players, growers associations, fintech companies, digital entrepreneurial efforts, etc. There is a huge ecosystem of stakeholders with whom we need to work with these co-innovations so that we can provide incentives for the implementation of the new technologies that will help us deal with the environmental challenges while keep on producing food. This can only be done through innovation hubs. And we already have some hubs in the different countries that this agency works out. And lastly, based upon science, we need to provide solutions. This is also done with all the stakeholders. Let's keep informed the creation of these public policies, and let's keep informing also about their implementation. This is crucial. The articulated public and private sector work is essential in order to have success at the short, medium, and long terms, considering all the challenges and all the stakeholders that we have within our society, as well as the gender differences, the role of youth that we have to support strongly in this region. And finally, I would like to thank you. This document, and I will add on to Hugo's words when he said, this is a turning point, a watershed where the work of institutions continue working together in order to strengthen the region's development in both aspects, agri-food production and innovation. Thank you very much for that synergy. Thank you so much for those words about collaboration and how to face these environmental challenges in our value chains. Thank you, Daisy. And with this, we have completed the first part of the interaction between IDV and the speakers from CGIAR. Now we will have Mrs. Quintana. He is the director of the Diversity Alliance International Center of Tropical Agriculture, CIMMYT. He will be moderating the different questions that have been received through our chat. We have had more than 100 participants in this virtual forum, and they have been highly active in this forum. Go ahead, Jesus. You should deal with these topics in a well-structured manner. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Joaquin. Thanks, colleagues. I would like to congratulate the panelists and to the commentator from CGIAR. As Joaquin said, we have received we have had a large audience, more than 130. Some have had to leave. First of all, it is important to have attended this presentation. It is important to hear the presentation of this innovative report that gives us clear elements of something that is important to Latin America, which is, this is a rigorous presentation that is data-based with the case studies and with the new IADB that wants to be innovative leader in the region based on new ideas and based on data. I would like to ask, what is the proposal so that this region that has spent most or has based its growth in the use of natural resources, mineral ones, but raw materials, without processing, without value creation, how is it that this sector may go how is that this sector can become one that generates wealth, inclusion, transformation, and that becomes an important sector in the region that creates value and that leads to training and capabilities in the region? We've heard, and this is transmitting the questions that we have received, but allow me to make a brief summary. We've seen what is the important role of the public goods. This is a fundamental part of what was presented. We are used to defending infrastructure, but also information, knowledge, technology, and the important role of research. I would like to stress the important role of CGIAR that allows us to have an agile and modern system. Most of all, we want to have a sustainable system, and we want to move ahead in the energy and environmental transition. And finally, the public-private sector links that maybe take place in an unusual way, not only with transferring resources, but playing a transforming role of the private sector. There are many colleagues that have participated. We have received many questions. It's very, this is unfair. I apologize. But I would like to pose some of the questions that we have received to the three panelists. The first one is addressed to Ernesto. In both the chats, we received the question of how is it that these proposals are aligned what you want to do in the agro-competitive system and agribusiness. How do you align the food safety objectives and those that have to do with the access to local food systems? Please answer, and then we will give the floor to the other panelists. Thank you very much for this question. I think that we have elements. Well, in the book, we emphasize some of the aspects that have to do with food safety. Probably we didn't emphasize as much other aspects that have been mentioned during the discussion, like topics that have to do with the nutritional content of the products that are important for food safety purposes and food security, but we emphasize topics like productivity, and in certain business models, as Hugo said, and rightly so, that these business models may contribute to considerably increase the productivity even of small growers or small farmers. This could be done through the mechanisms like cooperative associations or horizontal integration, or with vertical integration with the involvement of what we call trailblazer companies. There is technical assistance provided to the small farmers, allowing them to produce much more. There's the possibility of bringing the small farmers that produce certain crops, probably for subsistence, so that they can start producing crops that they can commercialize in other markets, even sophisticated markets that allow them to get a greater income. And thanks to this, we can address food safety and food security. What we are doing is aligned with the purpose of improving food security. There are other aspects that have to do with food security that are probably not mentioned that much in the document and that I would consider as pending subject matters. This question was asked by Gerardo Quiroga. I didn't mention it. We have a couple of questions addressed to Gustavo. Questions referred not to the speakers, but to the topics. Jesus Alberto Villamil and Adrián Rodriguez are asking if we are speaking about the public goods. We've spoken about knowledge, information, data, etc. Even though we are mentioning this as part of the public goods, there is a cost in the development of basic research that the research institutes pay for. What about INEAS in this collaboration? This is a question addressed to Gustavo because of the topic of the question. Many thanks for this question. I would say that undoubtedly, yes. Basic research is by definition a generic research that is not much appropriable, with certain exceptions. If the private sector is involved, it would be different, but we need to find funding mechanisms for basic research so that we can generate that basic knowledge. And it is not only knowledge, but the human resources that are involved in the creation process of that knowledge. I like the funding model of a research institute in the region in which part of the funding comes from specific taxes that are charged to the sector and that are invested in applied research to try to solve specific problems. But there are other resources that are produced specifically that represent direct transfers trying to generate room for basic research. At times, this is a way to open the door for innovative research or for innovation that is demanded more in the short term than in the long term. I think that this is reasonable, this kind of schemes I've seen in some institutes, but not in all of them. Thank you very much. Another question is by Jose Joaquin Campos. I think it's addressed to Romina. Are there examples and financial mechanisms to support trailblazer companies like social businesses whose revenues are used to support NGOs that support regenerative agriculture? This is important because we have not referred that much to that organic vision. However, you mentioned it, but advancing in new paradigm of regenerative agriculture. The question is, what are the examples or mechanisms that we may have to support the trailblazer companies that establish an interaction or a link with NGOs? Thanks for this question. My question will focus on the AIDB. The Inter-American Development Bank has one arm, IADB BARM or Exfomin that many of you know. The Sol Organica, a company in Nicaragua, has received financial funding by BidLab or IADB Lab. This began to be an organic company, then it focused on regenerative models. This is a company that throughout its evolution has received different types of support. And of course, that the role of the bank at those stages, particularly when companies are at the hinge stage, facing the challenges to be able to set up and trying to find new markers, as Neto said in the case of one company, going from dried fruit to ingredients. All of these are, or getting certifications, these are instances in which organizations like us with the established methods can support them. Once we trust what they can contribute to the environment and to the sector. I think this is a good example of the IADB that has a way of supporting these companies. Should we go to another round of questions? We have still a couple of additional questions. A question from Mohammad Hashid Hassad. I hope I pronounced your name properly. He asks how to support, and I think this is addressed to you because of the theme, how to better support the small farmers that we have not addressed, referred to that much. These are farmers or growers who do not have the necessary capability. But I would complete the question by asking, can we use the competitive agribusiness model and food agribusinesses as a leverage for social inclusion? I would complement the question by Muhammad Kashif Shazad, because at times there may be barriers for them to get in, or there may be barriers so that these institutions can continually support quality products. This considering that activity is carried out plurally. What it would be, this is an example for social inclusion and to fight poverty. Yes, I absolutely think that these models can be used as a social inclusion tool to help get people out of poverty. Chapter 6 of the book in this chapter, we go back to each of the study cases, whether it's trailblazer companies working with thousands of growers or cooperative associations. We held focus group meetings with some of the growers that participated in these schemes, trying to understand what impact this had on their income, on their quality of life. What was the impact of participating in this kind of schemes? Overall, as you can read in the book, the impact was quite favorable. But yes, it is true that certain growers that do not uh, are not able to get the necessary capabilities to have access to the trailblazer company model, sometimes because of lack of productivity, in other cases due to lack of infrastructure. The public sector plays a very important role in raising the capabilities of these sectors so that they can have access to these models. Let me give an example. Westphalia Group Peru is a company producing avocado in the Peruvian mountains. They work with small farmers, but in each of the valley where they go in, they need to have a minimum amount of production and minimum productivity of the participating farmers. Some of them don't reach that minimum because they don't have access they or to irrigation or funding for irrigation, or they are in the wrong valley where there are not enough farmers or enough rural roads allowing the companies to come and get the produce. And the government sector plays a fundamental role to granting them access to funding or building rural roads so that these growers can reach a level at which they can participate in some of these schemes. But many of the growers included in the study, for instance, the honey producing cooperatives in El Chaco in Argentina, or cooperatives that produce organic quinoa in Bolivian plateaus, or even fruit producers in the case of Sol Organica. All of these are farmers that began participating in these schemes without having a big capacity. It was only through these schemes that they were able to participate in the more formal markets. Allow me to reply to some of the comments that we have received. Hugo, you made certain comments. I'm really grateful to Valeria, Hugo, Daisy. You made excellent comments. But Hugo, you mentioned the fallacy that innovation is done without the state. I totally agree with you. You also mentioned that usually the role of the state has evolved. I would like to add that it has not only evolved, but it evolves multiple dimensions. The topic of risk was mentioned in the case of Peru. This was important for Peru to become a very important player regarding agri-food. But in the case of Peru, regulatory changes were made in land use and in the employment regulations. These things had to happen at the same time because without one of them, what happened would not have been possible. Regarding the creative destruction that you mentioned, we have wonderful examples in the book. You mentioned the case of blueberries in Peru that had an impact on blueberries in Chile. With one of the study cases in the book has to do with blueberries in Argentina, which were in the same window occupied by Peru later. So there were certain strategies of the sector in Argentina trying to open the Chinese market with promotional campaigns to say that our blueberries in Argentina were sweeter than those produced in Peru, or switching varieties or being involved in organic agriculture that happens more easily in Argentina than in Peru. What are the strategies that Argentina used trying to defend itself from the threat of Peruvian blueberries? business model is fundamental, and Campo Sol is an example. What matters is not the product or the service, but rather the model. Campo Sol did not regard itself as an asparagus producer. They were constantly trying to find new crops that they could market in order to take advantage of the opportunities that exist in the world. So they are changing constantly. Another important example is Kelimo, which is a company that uses satellite information and weather information to make recommendation as to what is the irrigation required by crops of the different farmers. This was very interesting. This was growing slowly, but they had a very slow client acquisition. So they have a new business model. So they now pay the growers for the water that they're saving, and they are involved in the water markets. And this has been a way of getting clients more easily. Something else that I wanted to highlight is the focus on the market flaws. I think this is semantic. I believe that we have to focus on the market flaws, but understood in the broad sense, not referring to solving the externality problems. No, we're speaking about coordination problems that prevent the development of markets that should be developed, but that by themselves cannot develop. I understand this also as a market flaw. And thinking about market flaws provide us a certain discipline to understand which are those flaws and how is it that we can set on the table policies that in a more accurate way tackle the things that lead to the market not generating the solution. Evaluation, innovation as a mission may be understood as part of this. I've written much about these topics. With Gustavo in 2014, we prepared a report known how to rethink productive development, and market flows were at the center of this approach, but considering them in the broad sense. I'd like to end here. And thanks to the commentators for your excellent comments. Thank you very much, Gustavo. We don't have time to entertain additional questions. We received very, very interesting questions. I would like to ask the CGIAR panelists and everyone to look at the Q&A chat box and see all the comments and questions that we have received. Allow me to give the floor to Bram.
Los que estamos conectados perdimos la conexión con el evento. No sé si nos están escuchando.
Sí, yo también. Yo te escucho, tío,
Those of us who are in Zoom lost connection with the live event. Our apologies. We lost connection with CIMMYT, so we can see what's going on, but we have no audio.
Maneras de valor agregado y tres diferentes
As an added value and three different concepts or models for aggregation of the growers. Presenting this in a clear way may allow us to design sort of the trajectory so that we can show how they can make the transit or the transition from one to another, each one of them having their own pros and cons. And of course, your analysis of the systems and the importance of the stakeholders we see as a challenge so that we can intertwine all of the concepts that Ernesto presented. How can we make this innovation system be connected with the different aggregation models and the different value models? Jesus, I really appreciate your questions, comments, your questions and comments. How is it that we can really change the poverty model and how can we generate inclusion? Valeria, why, how, when, and where? I think this is going to guide our thinking and to know how is it that we guide research at CIMMYT. When, how, and where are we going to generate an impact? I'm referring to what we are, to the research we are carrying out here. Gustavo spoke about the importance of competitivity and technologies. Hugo Campos, who is a great thinker about innovation, he challenged us so that we can think properly about innovation. And Romina made a very important comment that led me to thinking about the transition costs. How can we avoid generating a new exclusion factor? Speaking about inclusion and making sure that we leave no one behind. I think that all of those stakeholders here have the challenge of not generating new elements of exclusion, but rather of inclusion. I read the report with much attention. Allow me to highlight one of them. The trailblazer companies have the capacity to be linked to other growers. But how can trailblazer companies go beyond that so that we don't generate exclusion? The inclusion in modern agriculture has to do with the role that we play, but also the private sector and the public goods. Much emphasis was placed on the role of the public goods. In this respect, I think that we are facing a challenge, and I would like to challenge all of you here. If we are building together, what is our vision for 2100? What is the kind of world that we want to see in 2100? When I ask this, many tell me, well, I don't even know what I want in 2024, let alone 2100. That looks too far away. What accountability do I have for 2100? But those who have children, well, that's not that far away. Maybe we can start leaving behind the immediate interests that all of us have, and we are all tied to institutions, individuals, and societies. So what is the kind of world that we want to see in 2100? I want to challenge the region if I see the organization, the integration, and the common voice. A region like Africa is saying that in 2100, they want to be a continent that is fed but can feed others as well. This is a challenge for the region because I'm seeing the fractures and we see that we are not united. If we ask what kind of world do we want in 2100, we can say first where we are now and where do we want to go. So we need a strategic plan for that. In that tactic strategic plan, there is a role for the public doing and a role for the private sector. At times I ask myself, because I see pledges saying we're going to invest 50 million, 100 million, but we don't say where, how, who, and to whom. Well, we say how much, but we do not say to whom or where. Dollars in the private sector are not the same as a dollar in the public sector. We need to clearly say where each dollar is going in this setting. And we need to have a very compelling plan where both sectors are strengthened, the public and the private, instead of obstructing each other or generating adversities. These are the reflections that the book elicited on me. So the book met its goal of leading us or forcing us to think beyond what is public and private. We at CIMMYT have a huge challenge. We are working with many companies like Nestle, Bimbo, to have regenerative agriculture. We work with more than 3,000 growers, many tons of wheat, of maize that are produced using the sustainable models. The same for wheat. But now the team faces the challenge of applying some of the things that we have learned from these study cases, so that we can go one step beyond this and see how we can do this in wheat, maize, but also in potato, cocoa, and many other products. I don't want to say much more. I will only say that we have these tasks. Together, we are generating a strategic plan based on clear concepts, based on the data-based decision-making. I would like to recognize the Inter-American Development Bank for taking these steps in being compelling and saying we're going to generate the data and the concepts to support the decision-making process of a comprehensive sector and the comprehensive decision-making process. Thank you very much. Thanks, Bram. Thanks, everyone, for participating here with us. Thanks to everyone who attended remotely. It's not easy to remain attentive for 2.5 hours, but this was a very interesting topic, as we have seen. It's a topic of interest and of great value. Once again, thank you. The video will be available at our websites, the English and the Spanish version. It'll be there in 2 to 3 days. Once again, thank you. Thanks, Gloria, Leti, for being with us in person. Thanks, CIMMYT. Thanks to the colleagues of CGIAR, the centers in Mexico, and over there, Valeria in Washington, Hugo Lima, Gustavo, Romina. Thanks to everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
11:30.